If ever there was a time of year to do something just a little bit more complicated, now is the time. That's why I like to make decorated cookies at the holidays, because you know I'm not gonna do it any other time of the year. Today, I'm making a gingerbread bell. It's a delicious gingerbread cookie, and the last part, which is the decorating part, is the part that the kids are really gonna wanna get involved in. The first thing that you wanna do is make your cookie dough. That's why I'm measuring out 3½ cups of all-purpose flour. A teaspoon of baking soda. It's really lumpy, so I'm just gonna press some of it against the side to get the lumps out first and then scoop it out. A tablespoon of dry ginger, the ground dried ginger, not the fresh stuff. Major flavoring here. 2 teaspoons of ground cinnamon and ½ teaspoon of cloves. This is a very flavorful cookie. And then ½ teaspoon of fine salt. Whisk that all together, the huge. And then for your butter-based ingredients, 1 stick of unsalted butter, room temp, and 3/4 cup of dark brown sugar. Make sure it's packed. And then cream those together. You'll notice when you're creaming dark brown sugar or light brown sugar and butter that it doesn't get as light and fluffy as it does when you're using white sugar. That's because it's a much denser product. When it's creamed, you add your egg, 1 large egg. Beat that in. And to add a little bit more intensity and darkness of flavor, I'm gonna add 2/3 cup of unsulted molasses. For some depth of flavor, more depth of flavor than you're already gonna get, which is a lot from all those spices. Beat that in, just till it's nice and combined, and then you can add your dry ingredients. When you're done, that's easy. It's a lot of ingredients, but it's not hard. Slowly start beating in your flour so it doesn't fly, and then just raise the beaters to like a medium high and mix it until it all comes together. Oh my gosh, I wish you guys could smell this. It smells like the holidays. It's ridiculous how evocative that smell of gingerbread is, right? Once it's all done, you'll see that it's kind of wet dough, and you want to wrap that in plastic and refrigerate it before you roll it out, or else a disaster. Separate it into 2 and then wrap it in plastic and pat it into discs, and then refrigerate it for at least an hour and even up to overnight. Oops, you caught me. This dough's been refrigerating for 1 hour at least. Remember when I said it was gonna be kind of sticky? Cover your bases and roll it between parchment. Otherwise, it could be kind of a nightmare. Dust pretty generously on 1 sheet of parchment. Unwrap your dough, place it on there, and then dust the top with flour again. Top it with your second piece of parchment and just start rolling. I like to move my dough around so that it's nice and even as I'm rolling. Every once in a while, what I like to do to make sure there's no sticking is grab both pieces of parchment paper and then lift it up and flip it over. Then you take the top piece and then lift it off, dust with a little bit more flour, and continue rolling until you get to the thickness that you're looking for. For these cookies, I want it to be just over 1/8 of an inch thick. Once you have the thickness you like, then you're gonna wanna refrigerate it again for about 30 minutes, or you can freeze it for 10 minutes. Here I have my chilled already dough. Remove the parchment. I have a 3½ inch bell-shaped cutter. Obviously, you can use whatever shape you want. Place it on your chilled dough and cut out your shapes. Arrange the cutter on the dough as close together as possible so you waste as little as possible. It's kind of like a puzzle, right? Peel away the unused portion and discard that, and then you have your cookies already on your parchment lined sheet. You'll probably want to spread them out a little bit because they're a little bit close together right now and you want them more evenly distributed for even cooking. One of these small offset spatulas is actually a really great tool to run underneath your cookies to release them from the parchment if they're a little bit stuck. I'm going to transfer these to a clean piece of parchment. Now that they're all on a nice clean baking sheet, I can see that the edges are a little bit like rough, and one of my tricks that I like to do is I take a toothpick and I just run it along the edge, carefully removing any little excess pieces of dough so that it's a nice clean shape. Now you guys all think I'm going insane. This is one of those things that just brings out the perfectionist in me. Now that the edges are completely clean, you can put them into a 350-degree oven to bake. They need to be set. You don't want them turning too much darker. That'll take about 14 minutes. When the cookies are baked and cool, the fun part comes, the decorating. So this one we're gonna decorate with royal icing. I have 6 cups of confectioner sugar in this bowl, and to that I'm adding a ½ cup of pasteurized egg whites. Or any egg whites, I guess, if you're not worried about that kind of thing. 3/4 teaspoon of cream of tartar, And then beat it all up together, starting on low. Once it's all combined, you can speed it up a little bit, and then just mix it until it's nice and smooth, and it needs to be a consistency that is spreadable, but isn't so thick that it lumps. So if you feel like it's not like that, you can add a tiny bit of water. I like to check it by lifting some up and letting it fall back into the big bowl, and if it holds its shape and just slowly goes into the rest of the frosting and takes 5 seconds to disappear, I feel like that's the right thickness. I want to do 2 different colors on my cookies, so I want some white and some pink. Take a Ziploc bag and place it into a glass. Just fold the edges over the top, that holds it in place, and then transfer about a half of it, still white, into the bag. Just twist up the top of the Ziploc bag and then keep it closed with a rubber band just so none of the icing seeps out. Set it aside for a second. I'll show you what we're gonna do with that later. Add the pink food coloring to the rest of your icing mixture. Start with a little and then work your way up. And put my pink icing into the second bag. You need to cut a teeny hole in the very, very tip, because that's where the icing is gonna come out. But you don't want it too big, otherwise the icing's gonna fly all over the place. So cut off the very, very tip. Now that you have your colors prepared, it's time for the actual fun part, which is the decorating. So take your base color, whichever you want, pink or white, and you can alternate. And then outline on your bell the shape of your bell, leaving a little bit of an edge, like a 1/4 of an inch or less. And I know the kids are gonna wanna do this part and they're not gonna be precise, and that's okay. Just let them have a good time. I'm just telling myself that. So then fill in a nice even layer. I just like to move the tip of my bag back and forth, drawing the icing across the entire cookie. While it's still wet, you'll do your embellishment. Take your secondary color, cut a very small hole in the tip of that bag too. In this case, it's my white color. And draw lines across. If you want them to be exactly like ours, you can do 5, which is what we did. And then you take a toothpick and draw it up and down through the wet layers of icing to make the fun little effect. We did 3, so I'm gonna do 3 to show you. It's actually really easy, and once you get the hang of it, you're gonna be like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna do this to all my cookies, because it's so fun. Look, I have some done already, and they're magically dried. Be patient and let them dry, otherwise they'll get very messy. But once they are, you can pack them up, you can give them away as gifts. You know, you can make these into Christmas ornaments. All you have to do is, before you bake it, use a straw to poke a hole in the very top and then thread a string through them. What do you think about that? Be there with bells on. Ding!